Hey everybody, I'm back. I'm yeah, I've been away for quite a while. I've been working on my feature film, Look Into the Fire, and well, it is finally finished. I know it's the weirdest sensation, the weirdest thought that or just the weirdest reality that I can have right now. Um, Not to say that I haven't been part of films that haven't been completed and come out, and and I've seen I've seen the fruits of my labor up on the screen. But this is the first time that I had a big film, a film that was the most challenging, the most heartbreaking, the most aggravating, the most stressful project that I have ever done. And it took a long time. It took a really long time because it was supposed to take uh, only a couple years, if that, to complete. Now, if you've been following this podcast, and I understand it's been a very long time, there may not be anybody out there right now listening to this, not expecting that I'm live streaming right now. But, I started this podcast because of we shut down the world. And so besides my writing, I only had trying to get post production still going on this film, and then nothing for a long time, and then just writing. So I started the podcast to give me something to do, to have something to show up for every week. And I gotta say, before I go any further, like, I do appreciate everybody who had listened to the podcast, who had sent messages, and who had been really supportive of the podcast. I really appreciate it. Um, but yeah, in that entire time, before, every every day, every week, every month, every year, I had been trying to complete this film, Look Into the Fire. And every day, every week, every month was some kind of delay, some kind of, why isn't this happening? What is the next roadblock that's being thrown up in my way? And honestly, I came to a point where I thought, you know, I'm possibly just going to, like, it's going to be one of those films that is going to come out after I'm dead and gone. Like, it really just felt that way. It just felt like nothing was moving forward. It felt like there was just like it was never going to happen. Yeah, to be honest. Um but it really came together little by little. I had some great collaborators. I had, people who were working through lockdown and trying to make it work, and figure. We were figuring out what we could do to still get it done. And I just, I'm forever grateful for everybody who was involved in the film. They had to put up with a lot uh, of just stressful days, of delays, of waiting for stuff to happen. And I appreciate every single one of them. So that's what, if you've been following the podcast, you've kind of know this process. You've heard a little bit about it. Um, but it essentially came down to, I didn't want to announce anything until the film was done. So I really held back from advertising that I had a film coming out. I did talk about the fact that especially on the last episode, that the next time I came back, I was planning on having coming back when the film was done. And yep, it's done. it it's completely done. It's out in the world. You can find it on Amazon Prime. If you are outside of the United States or you don't have a VPN, you can find it on Tubi. It's popping up on different platforms, and it's been this gradual rollout because I'm going with a distributor that is more like a marketplace. They they kind of put it out to different streamers, and the streamers themselves decide whether or not they are going to take the film, which has been exciting and frustrating at the same time, as opposed to other distributors who kind of force the film on on other platforms, which for a new filmmaker, that's great. You get the opportunity to prove yourself if your film is really good, but then you risk the you know the film showing up on platforms where people will look at it and say, how how in the hell did this film make it onto this platform? I don't get it. I'm guess I'm going trying to go with the strength of the film as a calling card at this point. But it's like I said, it's been this gradual rollout, and it's exciting, and I'm starting to get reviews on the film. There's yeah, there's been some really positive feedback uh, about about the film, and you know I really love, like, okay, so let me level with you. When you're making something, for anybody who knows who has made something, you're so close to the project. You spend hours just thinking about details of what you're making. You're very immersed in what it is you're making, and to a point, you end up, I guess, getting bored of what you're making. You've seen the film, you've seen cuts, you know what's gonna happen. You're kind of just there, making sure that the story is holding together. You're making decisions about sound. You're making decisions about certain cuts, and after a while, it just becomes this this very familiar part of your life. And when you're in that mode, like, you hold on to this faith that your instinct was very tuned in to what it was you were making at the beginning. You wrote, like, if you wrote the script, you know for a fact that you you there was some kind of inspiration there. Uh, there was a character, there was a storyline, there was a theme that captivated you to a point where you just had to write it. And because of that, you spent hours writing the script. And then from there you spent hours refining the script. And then from there you try to get people interested in your script. And so when you find yourself at the end, and you've gone into production, you've you've stressed over trying to get the shots that you wanted, that you tried to make sure that that the cast understood what you were doing, that the people involved understood what you were doing. And then you find yourself with all this footage, and you're looking at it, and you know, I got to give credit to my script supervisor. You know, she had gone through the script, and when she, yeah, delivered her script that had all of her notes, she said, you know, even though we didn't cover like some of the scenes, yeah, even though we had to cut some things, you have a complete film. And at the time, I was this new, like I'd only directed a couple of short films. Uh, I had coverage of everything in those films. Like we had covered every single scene. So just being very nervous about what we had. Uh, I trusted it. I was like, okay, you say that we have everything that we need to tell the story, and I was like, okay. And then going into the editing, like I was overwhelmed. I was like, the my editor, uh, I brought on, and he had no idea about what scenes were shot, how they were supposed to come together. We spent like days upon days, like just kind of combing over the footage, and putting things together. And he, like I was like, all right, this here's the script. This is how things are supposed to go. And when all was said and done, there were only a few things in which, like, I was like, man, I really wish I would have gotten this shot or that shot, or like I really wish we would have um taken an extra day and gone and did some like more, like, if anything, I wish I got more B-roll, as funny as it may sound. I think I could have filled in a lot of just like atmosphere, and just like slow it, the having moments where things are kind of slowed down a bit before going into the next scene. But all in all, I'm very happy with what the film ended up being. And I think just hearing the feedback from people who have no idea about who I am, and they're watching it for the first time, and they're giving their reviews, or they came across it and they're like, oh my gosh, I really love this film. It's exciting. It gives you, it's such a, uh how do I describe, like, it's energizing. It's it's it reminds you about how, that initial instinct when you were writing the script, you were on to something. There was like, it just reminds you of why you made the film. Even though I know why I made the film, I know why I wrote the script. There was something, there was something that I was gravitating towards, and it just kind of like, well, was this story that I had been working on for a while. This concept, this idea of what does it feel like to be in a experiment. And that's a story I was kind of grappling with for a while, especially when I was in school. And I didn't get a lot of time to fill out what the story was going to be, but it was in the back of my mind. I was thinking about it. And once I graduated, when I'd spent, years upon years feeling like I was like, you know, on the run, just one thing after another, after another, after another, going from one class to another, working on one project, and then working on another and another, doing assignments, and it was just like this rush that I was in, this cycle of, go to school, go to work, go home, go to school, go to work, go home. And just doing that for 4 years, and then when it was all over, you know, it, I just I was like, I don't have to work on anything if I don't want to. Like it really came down to that, where I was just looking at the fact that, like, one, I kind of took the opportunity to just take a break, to be happy with the fact that I'd gone through college, I had graduated, I could relax and not force myself to work on anything. But then there was another part of me that realized, if I don't work on something, then I'm going to lose this momentum that I have. And so, as I was coming around to, like, okay, well, I've worked so hard, I've graduated. Now let's start digging into these ideas that, I only had an opportunity to write like a loose outline or maybe just a log line. And I just started looking through what's ideas I had. And one of the major benefits of being able of going to school, or, like, the kind of like the part of school that was sticking with me, was that I was forced to read. I had to read books, and at the time I really hated reading. I It's still kind of a struggle, depending on what it is I'm trying to read. But, like, when I started going to college, they were assigning me things to read, and, I was like, well, I know I hate reading, but if I'm going to take this seriously, then I need to read everything that's assigned, if not more. And so, because of that, because of the 4 years of going to college and forcing myself to read, uh, that was the one thing that I continued to do, afterwards. But since I didn't have anything assigned to me, like, I started to go to my bookshelf, and I was like, I've had these books on my shelf for years, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna read it, but you know how it is. You go into a bookstore, or, like, something sounds good in the moment, so you're like, you go into a bookstore, you go online, whatever, you're like, oh, I heard about this book, or, oh yeah, like, this book is one that I should be reading, and so you buy it, or whatever. And so there were a lot of books on my shelf that I just never cracked open. I was just like, I have this book, never read it, and now I have time. So why don't I start reading? And I started to go through, especially the film books. I was like, this is a perfect opportunity for me to just go through just all of these books, and just kind of build on my knowledge of what I learned in school, of what, you know of just what I've learned, and see if I can expand upon it. But another part of it was, I really uh, wanted to make sure that reading was still a habit. And my tactic that I used was that I was gonna read, like, I was starting to get bored of just the technical books, of just film books in general. I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm still gonna read these. I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna read all these, but I really want to branch out and start reading books that are just narratives, that are just fiction, because there's a story there, and then why not? So because of that, I started to check books out of the library, and um, the books in particular that I was aiming for were ones that I knew were already movies. And so I don't know how I settled on reading books by Dennis Lehane, but somehow I came across Shutter Island and I started reading it. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this book is great. I love this story. Like it's so good." And it reminded me of an idea I had about, you know, like this experience of being in a mental institution, or like not necessarily being in a mental institution, but of this idea of an experiment. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, it's about this crazy professor. He's got this kind of like experiment that he's doing, and he brings in all these people, or he brings in this very select group of people, and um we're he puts them through these different experiments, and part of like one of the classes I had taken was about psychology, and I've always been interested in psychology because, like, I don't believe my own eyes sometimes, or I don't. I think the way in which I perceive the world is much different than the way other people perceive it. Or, like, if you look at a situation, or you're in a situation, and you find yourself just like just the way you view what's going on in the world. I guarantee it's very much specific to your own experience, to your own way of thinking, to your understanding and your knowledge of just the world in general. And that's fascinating to me because it's like, especially with the way in which like social media has um been used, and the way in which things can be manipulated. um there have been a lot of uh there's a lot of information, especially in the last like 10 years, where you kind of look back at the way in which society looked at something or viewed something, and then you realize, oh wow, like, well, why did they view things like this? Oh, because of this and this, and this was the information that we had. Well, that information wasn't true. Oh, okay, well, then that's bad. that's really bad. Well, that's what people believed. Oh, well, why did they believe that? So the basic concept of knowledge and belief and perception was very I'm fascinated by it because human beings were so susceptible to sometimes the most basic of false information or false belief, uh and we hold on to it in this like this hope that what we believe is going to be true. And so, and I'm there've been plenty of times when I've just like believed in something so much, and I'm like, oh, this has got to come through, because why would it not come through? Or like, oh, this idea, like, oh, it's got to work. uh and and it doesn't, and you get heartbroken, and that's just on a basic level. But what if the reality that we know is a complete fabrication? Obviously, there are futurists, there are people who have already posed this question before, like, "Hey, look, we're living in a simulation." It's not new. There's nothing new under the sun. But this this basic concept of how we perceive the world, what is true and what is not, what how do we define this? What happens when our memories are faulty? What happens when um, we realize that there's something in our past that is horrific that uh, we've our brain has just hasn't retained that information or is intentionally blocking it out. What happens when we suddenly remember something about our past, and what does that mean? So that that idea was fermenting in my brain, and just reading Shutter Island, that kind of reinforced the structure of what it was I was trying to make. And not only that, seeing that, not only was the film brilliant by Martin Scorsese, I love that film. It's so heartbreaking. Like, oh man, you get to the end and you see this lie that the main character has been believing, and you see what actually happened, and it's heartbreaking is all I can say. And it stays very true to the book. And like I said, I read that book, I watched the movie right after, and I came to a point, like, uh, up to this point, I my only attempt at a film that was longer than a short film was like something that, like, the budget would have been like, I don't know, it could have been like a $200 million movie, and even then, like, the page count on that film was still like only 60 pages. Like, it was like that had been the biggest uh script that I had ever written, was like 60 pages, and I was just like, ah, yeah, like, I like, eh, and it all came down to fear. I was afraid of spending so much time on an idea and having it just suck. And, reading Shutter Island, watching the movie, I had read some other of, like, of some other books that had been, adapted to films. Um, but this one in particular, I just looked at it and I was just like, I can do this. Like, I just had this confidence of, yeah, like, I can write this story. Like, I can actually do it. And that, like, because of that, I just, something changed. I wasn't afraid of what it was I was going to write. And that's a very powerful mode to be in, where you just don't, like, you just don't care. You're like, you know what? I'm going to let the story uh I'm just going to write the story I want to write. I'm not going to care about, like, if I'm following any rules. I still ended up trying to, like, if I came to a part in a script where I wanted to make sure that at least on the page it made sense, I would follow those rules. But in terms of just the overall structure, I was like, let's just see where it goes. And okay, I didn't write the script right away. I decided that I was gonna write an outline, and I can't remember if I had already had. I think I had already had somewhat of a beginning outline uh, that I had started a while back, and I went back into it. Uh, but I just kind of I just the story started to flow, and at first I was like I I started to write it, and then I was getting stuck, and I was like, why am I getting stuck? Why am I getting stuck with this story? Like I know what to do, I know what I want to write. What's happening here? Like it's just not like it's not what I want it to be. And I realized that the problem with the way I was approaching the story was that I was approaching it from the perspective of the doctor. And I was like, okay, that makes sense because the doctor is the one who kind of is pulling all the strings. He's the one who's like seeing things from his perspective is really just it's kind of boring, to be honest. It's a it's he goes he goes to the lab. He checks data. He tells his his underlings what to do. Um, he checks on patients. Like that's not really that exciting. And because of that, I realized, okay, I need to have a change in perspective. I need to approach the story from somebody who wants to be a part of the experiment, who is looking to have who to expand his knowledge of psychology, to break out of what he is learning uh, from his teachers who are only giving him what he suspects is very limited information. And so from that, I was like, well, okay, if he's getting limited information and he's seeking out the doctor, why would he how would he get into this program? Like how would that work? And I was struggling with that as well. I was like, well, okay, well, if there's, this doctor who, maybe one of his teachers, shuts him down and says, "Oh, that doctor, like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a kook. He don't listen to a thing he says. Like he's been discredited. Don't, just don't." And I was like, "Well, okay, yeah, that okay, that gives the main character something to kind of push up against." And like maybe he makes it, like maybe there's this small trial period that he becomes a part of the experiment, and that's where we really start getting the putting the audience in the mind of someone who's insane, like what would like how would that look? But even then it turned into this it turned into a gimmick. To be honest, it was like, well, okay, like I had this idea of like, well, the first act is like, well, he gets to be in the perspective of this kind of like person, and then in the second act, he gets to get the perspective of what it feels like to be in you know this kind of like craziness or whatever. Like I had like these phases in mind where he's like, and it would be like this like first person point of view. But that even that started to fall apart because after you kind of show this like this perspective, where do you go from there? And it really kind of made me think of like the like 12 Monkeys, how it's just shot very wild, and like there's like these fisheye lens shots, and it's just so it's such a bizarre setting, and it like it does in a way put you in the perspective of what it feels like to be kind of like out of your mind, which I love. I mean, the movie 12 Monkeys is like an all-time classic, in my mind. And even when I saw it back in high school, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this thing's like so crazy, and it kind of does this like this time loop thing. And not to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but like it was a very interesting film. And I was like just like Shutter Island, I was like 12 Monkeys. That's another film that like I really love, and I want to make something that is like that, where you just after you watch the film, you're just kind of like you're stuck in this like you're just thinking about the film, you're just thinking about like what you just saw and like what it all means. And I was just like, oh, I so want to make something like that. um so okay, being in the perspective of the main character, this POV wasn't gonna work. So I was like, okay, fine. That's not working. So what's the next step from there? Well, the next step from there was to actually have the main character be in the class with with a professor, and the professor is also kind of like he's out there. He wants to push his students to find the next discovery, the what's the big jump forward, and I was like, oh, that's it. That that is how the story is gonna unfold. It's gonna be because this the student who has been seeking to do something more with his studies gets into a class with a professor who really wants to encourage taking chances, doing experiments that are kind of out there, but maybe it'll be it'll push towards this next discovery in science. And I was like, yes, that is what this story needs to be about. That a, this professor who gives the student permission to and not just him, but his entire class, to do this very crazy experiment, because he wants to he just wants, like, he maybe he feels like he has his hands tied in terms of the faculty, but he just wants to see his students thrive and to find the next discovery. And so you know that's where it started. And once I had that perspective, once I made that switch, it started to really just unfold. And I started to think about the different students in the class, and how he's going to be like this guy who's like really pushing like the team to like to do these to just do something that has never been done before, or at least like to attempt to make a breakthrough in this part of science that digs into the brain, which really like it, allows for scientists to read brain waves, to be able to see thoughts as actual images. And I funny thing, that kind of technology like is, I mean, maybe I'm a bit late to the party on it, or maybe I'm just in time, but that technology, like I've seen stories already. I've said the news has reported on little advances in brain technology, and being able to read thoughts, be able to read someone's thoughts. And that once I kind of settled on that, that's when it started to unfold. That's when I started to discover that, like, okay, well, if he's digging into his brain, like what's in his brain? Like what would you find in somebody's brain? It's going to be something that you're not going to like. It's going to be something that the person that you're doing it to is not going to like. But then let's take it a step further. What happens? Like what really happens if uh you dig into somebody's brain and something happens in that person's brain that unlocks this past memory that they didn't even realize was there. Like what would that mean? Like I I'm going to kind of base it on myself. Like I kind of based it a bit on myself because you know, I think about my past. I think about you know, just not even traumatic stuff, just things that I did, you know, the places that I went, things that I saw, just I I look at pictures you know, of me as a young kid and I think I don't have any recollection of this happening. I don't remember being there. I don't remember any of this. And that was fascinating to me because I'm like, well, I mean, I can't be the only one. I mean, how many billions upon billions of people have lived on this earth? How many of us remember our childhoods, or at least remember them vividly, or remember them completely? And I thought, what if I gave this main character something so traumatic that they, like, when they go into this experiment, it opens it back up? That they suddenly just realize, oh my gosh, like I remember something, but what is it? Is it that what I remembered is is it true? Is it actually true? And that was very fascinating to me. And okay, I'm not the first one to do it. There's been plenty of movies out there that deal with false memory and unlocking you like memories and traumatic stuff. Like I'm not the first one to do this, but I've always been fascinated with that part of psychology as well. Like, well, and especially I had read some stories about um, experiments where patients had suggestive memories, meaning that the memory that they had was not true. It was not true at all, but they remembered it so vividly because somebody had put the impression in their mind that that was something that had happened in their past. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. That's like a form of brainwashing essentially. Uh but the people who it was done to, like, they swore that what they remembered was true. They placed themselves in that scenario. They remember vividly that's something that they did, or that's something that happened to them. And that was just another layer. I was like, that, yeah, that is fascinating. And then to build on that even more, I thought, okay, well, if somebody has something traumatic in their past and they have forgotten about it, why have they forgotten about it? And I thought, well, what if it was something, like something traumatic happened? And I'm not giving any spoilers away. I really want you to go see the film. I want you to go on Amazon or on Tubi and watch the film for yourself. There's gonna be no spoilers here, except for maybe if you know things that might slip. So, but I thought, okay, if there's something traumatic in this character's life that they've completely blocked out, why have they blocked it out? And what if there was somebody who was intentionally trying to keep them from remembering that it happened at all. And that's when I thought, well, what if there was like a sibling, and not just like a biological sibling, but like a step sibling, a stepsister. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. Like, what if we, like, what if I had this sister that had been like really responsible. Like she's been stringent and super responsible for um making sure that this main character stayed in line. Not because she was being malicious about it, but because she knew that if he remembered what actually happened, that it would it would cause something very traumatic to happen. Like he would do something, he would fly off the handle, he would do something drastic. And that was fascinating because I was like, okay, well, we have this sister character who, when we're following the story, we don't know what her motives are. Like we think, you know, we see the main character reacting to her being very persistent with trying to get in touch with him, and he's just blowing her off. He's like, nope, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't like. I'm not answering your phone calls. Nothing. I don't want any kind of connection. Um, but then, uh, but then having her be part of this story where she ends up kind of turning into this villain, but not because she's trying to be malicious, not because she's um like this, mustache twirling villain who just wants to do evil, but it's like she's only doing it because she's like looking out for, like, she's just trying to protect him. She's trying to make sure that like he doesn't, like, he doesn't go off his meds, that he's just, that he kind of stays at a place where he's just gonna live his life like this for a while. Like he's just gonna stay even keel, but there's something in their past where he just kind of like, you can tell that he um has broken ties. Like she's been looking out for him since they were kids, but once he got a little taste of being like you, of being independent and being able to like go out on his own, like he takes the first opportunity. He's like, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go to college, and like he probably just left, and she, the only way that she has any like connection with him is just like his phone number, and like, and she still kind of like keeps tabs on him and stuff like that. So that whole thing was fascinating because it's like, well, you have this villain character that, the most like what I love about villains, not necessarily that they are uh the making them sympathetic, but that you understand their motives. And with the character of Janet, you understand that the reason why she's doing what she's doing is not because she's like trying to be malicious, but she's just trying to protect Adam. I didn't say what the main character's name was, but the main character's name is Adam, and his stepsister is Janet. So they, that is the push and pull. That's the tension that is established in the film. And so you get to kind of see that relationship unfold. You get to see how she's really trying to keep him from doing anything that's drastic, and you see him pushing back against her. You see him doing things that, he's like going behind her back, because there's a part of the film where it seems like he's trapped in her house, and the house is in the middle of nowhere, and so he's like trying to still he's still trying to get his work done. He's still trying to figure out what is why he had this memory of his past, and he's still trying to figure things out. But he's still trying, but like his sister is doing everything possible to keep him sedated, to keep him in her house, so that he doesn't find out. So there, there's so much tension there, and it was fascinating. I loved writing. I loved taking the story from one location that is like very sterile. It's in a classroom, it's in a lab, and then all of a sudden you find yourself out in the middle of nowhere in wilderness, and it's a completely different setting. And I've always loved movies like that when you start off in one place and then by the end you end up someplace else. And those stories those movies have always been very interesting to me because by the end you're like, wow, like we started over here and then all of a sudden we ended up in this other place, and it felt natural. It felt like there was a journey that was happening. And I just I love movies like that kind of take you on this journey, uh not only in terms of like what the characters are going through, but also just with with locations. So that yeah, that's been a it was fascinating to me. And then writing the dynamic of the two of them was so much fun. There was so much of this, like you know uh Janet does this, and then Adam does this to counter what she's doing, and then you know he tries to get away from the house, but he realizes that he's in the middle of nowhere, miles from anywhere, and he has no car. So like how is he going to get out of this situation? And he ends up uh he ends up having to get in touch with like his classmates that he's been working with, and essentially says, hey, like I'm trapped out here. I really need help. I really like I need to get out of here. And because his classmates that he's working with are like, well, should we go, like they kind of debated a little bit, like should we go and help him? And they're like, well, we really need to get this project done. Like it's his idea. He kind of has all the, like he kind of knows like what it is we're supposed to be doing, because he hasn't done a great job of really telling us, or just like we kind of need him because he is also the guy that we're doing some of the experiments on as well. They kind of need him, so they take a chance and they go out and they try to rescue him. And I'll leave it up to you to watch the film to see if they succeed or not. But like writing that dynamic was a lot of fun. Just having these guys who are just just they they know what they're doing, so they're able to kind of have this banter, back and forth. There's obviously like different personalities involved and different kind of like butting of heads, to a certain extent. And it was fun. It was fun to write. And then once I was done with the treatment, and then I was into the script, I was like, oh, this is so much fun. I expanded upon it, and it was just I had a blast. I'd never had, I don't want to say writing the script was easy, but it was to the point where I was like, it came so naturally that I could sit down and just start pumping out pages, and the characters were kind of taking, they were coming off the page, and I could hear them speaking, and I was like, wow, this is fun, this is fascinating, this is great. I really I think this is something that I want to make. And it took a couple years. Like once I was finished with the script, I was sending it off to my colleagues and people I'd gone to school with, and I was like, "Here's a new script. I would love to make it someday." And everybody came back with like "Yeah, this is great. We really love it. This is very interesting. I can't, I hope this gets made." And and yeah, I mean, I guess the rest is history, but it took a little while to get it off the ground because I had no idea where to go. It was such a big project. It seemed like one of those projects that I would have to wait many, many years to do because it in my mind it seemed like this big thing, this big, you know, $200 million film, you know, so it was, but we managed to make it. We managed to pull it together, and it's still something I'm very proud of. And I love the fact that people are into it, that they are reviewing it. They're giving it some good reviews. So I just yeah I couldn't be happier with where it is now. And so with that, it's like, what's next? What is the next film? And right now I got to be honest, it's kind of intimidating to go into the next film. It required so much of my attention and time and persistence and patience to just get this film done, that jumping back into it, I was like, I don't know, like I just don't know. Um, to be fair, this film required special effects, which it was my first time using special effects. And so that was daunting. That was somewhat complicated. That was somewhat like a part of the process that took the the longest to do because it the it just was going to take a long time. But if I had just done a film where it was just people talking, maybe I had to shoot some B-roll or whatever. Like it could have been done a lot faster. Um, but because I had this extra layer of like special effects, it just added on to just the overall timeline of getting the film done. But this next one that I have in mind, it has its own challenges, but it doesn't require special effects. It's very much it's a comedy, takes place in one location, and the big problem, the big thing that I'm coming up against is just one, money to rent out the location. That's pretty much it. And other than that, like I got people who are excited about it, who are on board. I would have to, I haven't gone through the casting process yet, but I got somebody who wants to produce it. I got somebody who wants to shoot it. So yeah, it really is just kind of like once I find that location that has a reasonable, uh, I guess, offer to let us film inside of it, which I've found one that I'm just so excited about. Just not only the interior but the exterior. I'm so excited about this location. I think it's perfect. I hope that I need to actually like um go up to them and say, hey, I'm a filmmaker, very independent, very very independent. I would love to use your bar. I would love to use the yeah. By the way, the location is a bar. So the you know I would need to use the bar for such and such amount of time. What is the rate to rent it out? Such and such. And you know, I've looked at some other locations and just the rate that they were asking for. I was just like, I don't have that kind of money. You basically are asking for the amount that would be the entire production of this film, and that's not happening. We don't have the money. We're not that kind of production. We're very much a bare bones run and gun kind of production. We just need access for a certain amount of hours to to film what we need to get filmed, and that's it. So anyway, guys, this has been a nice stream. If you listen to it on the rewatch, give it a like, share the stream, subscribe to the channel. I really would love to do more of these live streams. They're a lot of fun. I can talk more about other issues that are coming up. Obviously, if you've been paying attention, there's been the writer's strike, but there's also negotiations happening with the Directors Guild as well as the Actors Guild. So, yeah, there could be a trifecta of guilds striking against against the studios, and we may be in this major halt when it comes to production on anything. So it's going to be interesting going forward. I can talk more about this on other streams, but for now I just wanted to say I'm back, that my film Look Into the Fire is officially done. It's out in the world. You can see it on Amazon Prime, on Tubi, and as well, if you end up watching it, leave a review. Um, give it a star. Give it 5 stars. Like if you want to give it 5 stars, I won't say no. So that's it. Yeah, and if you do see it and hey, you don't want to give a review or something, like send me an email, like at tentative.title.with.tim.podcast@gmail.com. You can send it there. I'm also on Twitter at title_Tim. You can send me messages there. And yeah, I would love to just hear what people are saying. I know it's a scary thing to make something and then you don't know if people are gonna like it, and that's part of this process of, like, I had no idea when it was done and it started to come out into the world. I wasn't sure if anybody was gonna care. I wasn't sure if anybody was gonna like it. And to be fair, there have been some people who have reviewed it, and they're like, yeah, don't like don't like it at all. And I don't know who those people are. I don't know if it's the kind of film they like. I don't know if they were expecting a $100 million film, or what, because some people, when they watch films, they only they don't. I don't want to say that they don't do this, but it's like it's very easy to want a film to be better than it is. And the reality is, a film is only as good as the resources that it had access to. Uh, it's only as good as the amount of money that they had. It's only as good as, like, fill in the blank. So I did my best. I'm proud with what I was able to put together. I'm proud of the team that was involved, and I will defend it, because I think we did a great job with what we had. And obviously, like with everything, it could have been better. There could have been a lot more things that I could have done with it, but I made the choices that I made with the information that I had, and it still came out being a pretty good film. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for showing up, and like I said, I want to do more of these live streams. Maybe on Wednesdays. I'm not really sure. I really need to figure that out, since this was a kind of impromptu live stream. Um, because I've been thinking about this for some days now, where I was like, I really need to start doing live streams again. They're a lot of fun. I love watching live streams, and just it's a way to have this like live conversation, and also while I was kind of doing other things, I got involved with another podcast that has nothing to do with film, but I'll plug the podcast here because we are the like another part of it is that we started to do live streams on this other podcast. But subscribe to the SVT Sports podcast as well, and we do live streams every Monday at 5:30 on California time. So because I'm in California, but yeah. So if you like sports, then show up for that one. And we got three three co-hosts who are very knowledgeable and very passionate about sports. And I'm there. I'm kind of in the background. I'm making sure that I'm the producer on it, so I kind of make sure that everything kind of runs on time. And making sure that trying to get in touch with people to let them know that, like, hey, we're live streaming. So anyway, guys, thank you so much, and I will catch you on the next one.